Hey, what's going on? Jimmy Cosenza here in Chicago. Hope everybody's having a good week. For those of you who are new to my channel, I've been a court buff going back to the early 1990s all the way to the mid 2000s. And I was very fortunate, very lucky to attend and sit in on some of the biggest federal trials in the history of the city of Chicago. And a lot of those trials were about the Chicago mob. I also attended several trials, state trials at 26 in California. Now, I'm not a reporter. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a cop. I'm not a law student. These trials are open to the public. Till this day, any one of us can attend a trial. So keep that in mind. But I'll tell you, there's nothing like it, especially probably in the mid 1990s, right? Imagine being in the courtroom and you're sitting 15 feet away from Sam Carlisi, right? Or you're at another trial and there's Frank Calabrese. Imagine seeing him lose his temper in the courtroom. It's better than any movie, any Netflix, any HBO series, any book. There's nothing like being in the courtroom. So that's mostly what my channel is about. And then obviously I take a little deeper dive into the history of the Chicago outfit. If you guys like my channel, hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. For those of you who get upset if I mispronounce somebody's name or I maybe get something wrong, take it easy, take a couple steps back, chill out. And for you haters, well, we'll talk about you haters at the end of the video. But let's get into it. We're going to talk about the GOAT. We're going to talk about Tony Accardo's legacy in Chicago, a little bit of history, and some of the men that were very close to him. Now, as always, I want to plug my sponsor here real quick. Let's see. Anybody looking for a job, check out Career Empower, one of the best recruiters in the business. These guys will help you in your career search. Here's a link. Also, check out my friend Mary's book, Lovers, Liars, and Clowns, Tales of the Patch. You can easily get it on Amazon. It's Mary's first book. She talks about what it was like growing up in the Grand Avenue Patch, spending time with men like Frankie Collada, Joe Lombardo, Jack Cerrone, a couple other guys I'm not going to mention their name. But these are neighborhood stories that she tells. So stay tuned. But let's get into it, man. Hope everybody's doing well. Let me bear with me here. Here we go. Now, going back to the early years, you got Al Capone, right? Tony Accardo was one of Al Capone's most trusted bodyguards, machine gun killer, hitman, whatever you want to call him. We all know the story where allegedly Tony Accardo beat up a suspected informant with a baseball bat, impressing Al Capone, who gave him the nickname Joe Batters. That stuck. A lot of the men that were close to him called him Joe. I like the name JB. So he was very, very close and trusted with Al Capone. When Frank Nitti took over the reins of the Chicago outfit, Tony Accardo was right under him. Something that not talked about a lot, but Tony Accardo and Frank Nitti were very close. And then sadly, Nitti found himself in some deep water and he committed suicide on the railroad tracks right there in North Riverside, not too far from North Riverside Mall. But I bring up Frank Nitti and Al Capone because these two guys here were Tony Accardo's proteges, if you will, his mentors. Now, here's another guy you don't hear much about, Paul Ricca. Now, some people in the know will say he was the real boss of the Chicago outfit, not Tony Accardo. But one story I love about Ricca is when he was in jail, Tony Accardo would pose as an attorney and he would go visit him, and then they would have private meetings. So I thought that was pretty cool how Accardo would disguise himself as a lawyer and visit with the boss of Chicago outfit, one of the most powerful men in the country back in the day. Paul Ricca, kind of like a Carlo Gambino, very humble, quiet, very low-key guy. Another very close ally, eventually became an op. You got Sam Giancana, right? Momo. Now, he didn't get his name Momo or Looney for no reason. Mooney, because he was a little crazy, right? He did not listen to Tony Accardo as far as keep your head low, fly low under the government radar. He did the exact opposite, right? Drawing a lot of heat, pissing off a lot of the FBI agents, breaking rules. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Through my research, I've heard that the relationship changed where Tony Accardo no longer likes Sam Giancana, right? Because of his behavior. But at one point, these two were very close. And an interesting thing, a lot of the guys in the Taylor Street area, they feel Sam Giancana was the real boss of Chicago outfit because they're from the 42 gang. What do you guys think? I'm pretty sure Tony Accardo was overall boss right under Paul Ricca, but some people, some guys in the Taylor Street neighborhood feel Giancana earned that spot, being from the 42 gang. We'll keep going here. Oh, before, how could I forget? We all know when Giancana was at home after he landed down in Mexico, came back, he's at his home in Oak Park, cooking a nice little Italian dish. He answered the door to one of his friends, somebody he trusted. As soon as he turned his back on the stove, somebody pumped, I forget, 5, 6, 7 bullets into Giancana's head, killing him right there on his kitchen floor. And I think one or two of the bullets, I think he was shot once or twice in the mouth and the chin. So that was an unsolved crime for many, many years. I think it still is today. A lot of people think Butchie did it because he was very close to Giancana. Some people even think Tony Spilotro did it. And then after the family secrets trial, with Nick Calabrese's cooperation, his rat nephew, Junior Calabrese, his information, it came out that Tony Accardo himself allegedly killed Sam Giancana. Now, I'm still kind of on the fence on that. It's very possible, but when I heard in court at the family secrets trial that the gun, the murder weapon that was used in killing him, was modified by Ronnie Jarrett and Frank Calabrese Sr. at Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage. As soon as I heard that, even before Junior and Nick told the cops what they believe happened, as soon as I heard that gun was made by Frank Calabrese and Ronnie Jarrett, given to Angelo passing it on, then I thought, yeah, maybe JB did have something to do with it. What do you guys think, though? I don't know. Another very close friend and very powerful man in the Chicago outfit you don't hear too much about. You got old man Battaglia, Teats Battaglia. He got that nickname because he would knock your teeth out. But this is Sam Battaglia, a legendary family, not only in the Chicago outfit, but Chicago itself. His grandson, as we all know, was an NHL hockey player. Actually seen him twice when he was on the Carolina Hurricanes. Not sure if he won a cup, though. Also, throughout the city of Chicago, you always see Battaglia produce. And I'm not sure if that was part of Mr. Battaglia's family or not. but a gold mine, if you will, in the produce. A lot of Italians made fortunes in the produce family back then and still today. But this is a great photo of Tony Accardo on the left and Sam Battaglia. I'm reading it now. It says they're right outside the Senate Racket Committee. So both of them must have got called the same day, and I'm sure they both pleaded the fifth. But you're looking at two of the most powerful men in the country back then. Another close friend of Tony Accardo, you got Joy Aiuppa, right? When Accardo stepped back and became more like a consigliere, moved out west, it was Joy Aiuppa that took over the reins of the Chicago outfit. And he led with an iron fist, as we all know. If he felt you were going to be a rat, if you were breaking rules, if you were getting out of line, if you were stealing, he'd have you clipped. And he had all kinds of powerful crews that were very capable of doing it. I can't even imagine how many guys Aiuppa killed. I'd say well over 150. What do you guys think? But they referred to him in court at the family secrets trial as the old man. That was their code name for Aiuppa. And I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. Right before he went to jail, according to Nikki Calabrese, he told Carlisi and Joe Nagol, he wanted both of those brothers knocked down. He didn't care how it got done, but he wanted it done. But this is Joe Aiuppa, one of the most powerful men in the country at the time. Even a lot of the New York wise guys, Tony Ducks, Fat Tony Salerno, were on tape on a government wire talking about how dangerous the Chicago outfit guys were. Here's another great photo. I mean, look at these cars, right? Probably like an old Buick. These cars are like tanks. You could fit like 8 people in here. Here's JB himself driving, and I can't make out who's riding shotgun. Let me know if you guys know who that is. But we'll keep going with more friends of Tony Accardo. This is one of my favorite photos. Now, on the far left, the gentleman in the white shirt with the big smile and glasses. At first, I thought for sure this was Pat Marcy, who led the very powerful First Ward. I went to his trial, but he was too sick to stand trial. But his co-defendant, Alderman Fred Rohde, was found guilty. But if anybody knows who this is, please refresh my memory. I thought it was Pat Marcy. Now, obviously, the darkest gentleman in the room with the nice tan from spending all that time in beautiful Palm Springs, California. You got Tony himself sitting down right behind him. I mean, look how close he is one of his right-hand men at the time. You got Jack Cerrone. Next to him in the tie, you got my guy, the old man, Joey Aiuppa. I mean, just look, all these men had big smiles on their face, right? And then sitting down, kneeling with the maroon sport jacket, he's literally got his arm draped over Tony Accardo's knee. That's Sam Alex, a guy you never hear about. Talk about flying low under the government's radar. And then right next to him, you got Gus Alex, the political fixer. That was the very first trial I ever went to, was the Gus Alex trial. Sadly for Gussie, they convicted him. They were able to prove to the jury that Gus Alex was receiving kickbacks from that low-life piece of shit, Lenny Patrick, and his violent street crew. But this is one of my favorite photos, and it just shows how close, how tight of a bond these gentlemen are. Between these 6 men, probably made over $100 million. Easy. But yeah, this is later on, though, sadly. Here, we'll go around the room. Tony Accardo, we know, never spent one night in jail. Never spent one night in jail, being the leader of one of the most powerful gangs in the country, right? He passed away of natural causes. Jack Cerrone got convicted and sent to prison during the strawman indictment. He came home, and I think he died like 1 or 2 years later. Same thing with Aiuppa. When he came home after the indictment, the strawman indictment, first thing he did was raise the Italian flag and the American flag at his mansion in Oak Brook. He eventually passed away. But he didn't die in jail. Sadly, Sam Alex, he committed suicide. And Gus Alex sadly died in prison based on that fucking lowlife Lenny Patrick, 78-year-old killer that lied on the stand, committed perjury. His testimony, along with James Lavelli, convicted Gus Alex. Pretty much gave him a life sentence. 15 years, but Gus Alex died of a heart attack. But all these men made millions of dollars. And probably the most famous mobster photo ever, in my opinion. Whoever took this photo deserves the Pulitzer Prize, right? So here you got, and they showed this photo. The prosecution showed this photo at the family secrets trial when they had Joey Lombardo on the hot seat. And we went around the table. Joey denied knowing most of the men at the table. Joey said that he was at a wake and he had a taste for a nice roast beef sandwich. So he went to the restaurant and the guys recognized him. They called him over to have a drink. But sitting at the head of the table, you got Joey Aiuppa. Next to him, you have Dominic DeBella. Joey said the reason these men got together, it was a going away party for him. You could see how thin he is, how sick he is. Right next to him, you got, I think that's Vince Solano, right? Boss of the Rush Street Gold Coast area. Then you got next to him Al Pilato, boss of the Chicago Heights crew. He actually survived an assassination attempt on the golf course in Chicago Heights or somewhere in the southwest suburbs. Then you got Jack Cerrone. Joey admitted being Jackie's caddy at the golf course. There's Joey standing up in the suit. And then Joey referred to the guy in the white shirt as the fat guy. That's James Turturello. Like Joe Nagel, he died of natural causes in his 50s. My dad fought in Korea and was in the Marine Corps with this guy. My dad told me that he was the toughest Marine. But this is James Turturello. If he wouldn't have died, just like Joe Ferriola, these guys were great, great leaders, man. Then you got Caesar, Little Caesar, Al DeVarco. I did a story on him. He took over the Rush Street Rackets as well. And then Joey denied even knowing Little Caesar. Then the prosecutor reminded him that we have proof that you two had an ongoing beef. Then you got the Northwestern suburb gambling boss, Big Joe Amato, a guy you never hear about. And then, of course, JB. But again, you're looking at some of the most powerful, wealthiest, dangerous men in the entire country. Chicago Alpha controlled everything west of the Mississippi. Here's some close powerhouses, heavyweights, not heavyweights, mob guys, but businessmen with Tony Accardo. I'm not sure who these guys are. If anybody knows, please enter into the comments. You got to love this. You got Tony Accardo. Looks like he's at a family function with a lot of close family members and friends. Now, the gentleman to the left, I believe, is Nick the plumber from Melrose Plumbing, Nick Palermo. I touched on him in a previous story. But this is a gentleman you never hear of, and probably Tony Accardo's BFF, probably his best friend, his right-hand man. But this gentleman, not only did he have clout and power, but he was more like the velvet glove. Now here's Nick. My bad. Here's Nick the plumber, the guy with the handsome guy there with the watch, standing up with the watch. This is a guy you never hear about. This is Nick the plumber, one of Tony Accardo's best friends, his right hand man. Not a heavyweight guy, but more of a velvet glove type of guy. And this gentleman here. Now Nick, he went on all the trips with JB. Imagine all the vacations and trips these men went on, right? Down to Florida, out to Vegas, Europe, hunting, fishing trips. Imagine the good times, right? But Nick Palermo, he was in with JB. Anytime they met with the Genovese family, they would usually meet in the Caribbean. So imagine you got Chicago outfit bosses meeting the Genovese guys on vacation in the Caribbean. And JB, he protected Nick. He made sure that they left his name out of the limelight. Everybody in Melrose Park, Taylor Street, Grand Avenue, Bridgeport, all love this man. A lot of the never before seen photos you're going to see where they're having barbecues, picnics, family, friends, parties. A lot of them were held at Nick's house. But let's keep going here. Here you got a great old photo. You got JB. Can't tell who that is. That looks like a pretty serious man there in the middle. You got the waiter on his best behavior. And then probably another wise guy here. I'm not sure who these two gentlemen are. The guy in the middle might be Joe Arnold. Not sure. The guy in the left in the glasses looks real familiar. But if anybody knows, please enter their names into the comments. Tony Accardo, as we all know, married Clarice. She was a beautiful Polish woman, and I believe she sang in the choir. But just look. I don't know if you can see it, but look closely. Look how pissed off Tony is at some nosy photographer trying to get a cheap photo, or maybe an agent. But look at the look on his face. He wasn't too happy there. There's JB again. I forget who the gentleman is behind him. Another close friend. You can tell Tony liked to have a good time with family and friends. Here's Tony with an actual smile on his face, something you don't see. Looks like he's going into maybe one of the Kiefer or the Senate committees, or maybe a hearing or court. Who knows? But he looks like he's walking with, again, I can't recognize that guy. Either an associate or maybe an attorney. But this is a great photo of him smiling. Great job by the photographer. And as I mentioned before, the Chicago outfit had close ties to Vito Genovese and the Genovese crime family. As we all know, in the five families, the Genovese family that was later on ran by Chin, they consider them the Ivy League. I think they had the least amount of snitches. But the Chicago outfit and the Genovese family definitely had business dealing and relationships. Here's another photo. JB walking. I mean, look at the fashion here. He's got the fedora, the overcoat. Probably he's got a nice Armani suit. He's got the caned bags. There's his young, beautiful Polish wife. Again, he's giving the photographer a dirty look. Obviously, he does not like his photo taken with his wife or family. He's lucky he didn't get a fucking beating like Aiuppa when Aiuppa ran after the reporter. Great photo of JB back in the day, taking the fifth, pleading the fifth. I think this is at the Senate hearings. I forget how many times, but you could watch this on video. He repeatedly says, "Yes, sir. No, sir." But this is JB, stone cold, stand-up gentleman. Never spent one night in prison. As we all know, he was a very successful beer salesman. Great photo here by the surveillance agents. You got Tony Accardo in his prime with his underboss, Jack Cerrone. Obviously, JB trusted him, probably like almost like a father-son relationship. But these two were very, very close. Just imagine the money that these gentlemen made together. Here we go. Another close friend of JB's, not a wise guy, but a businessman, a jeweler. Forgive me if I'm saying his name wrong, but I believe it's Harry. Wait, let me get it right. Harry Levinson, one of the biggest jewelers in Chicago, had a couple jewelry stores on Wabash. What happens, as we all know, there's a lot of burglars and thieves in Chicago, right? Mostly in the Grand Avenue, Taylor Street neighborhood, right? Some of the best burglars, thieves in the Midwest, if not the country. But they robbed this gentleman's jewelry store and got away with some very precious gems. But they had no idea that he was good friends with Tony Accardo. He went to Tony. He told him exactly what happened. Sure enough, Accardo made a couple calls, found out who was responsible for the break-in, and he demanded that the crew return the jewels, which they did. Nobody's going to argue. But as a revenge, John Mendel and another low-life burglar decided to get revenge and break into Tony Accardo's home, knowing that there's a good chance he's probably out in Palm Springs, California. So these fools broke into Tony Accardo's home. As we all know the story, Tony Accardo was vacationing in beautiful Palm Springs. He gets the call from his houseman saying there's been a break-in. He immediately flies home, and he's fucking livid, right? Sure enough, he makes a few calls, and he finds out, I think it was Tony Spilotro, I'm not sure, told him that the only man that could pull off something like that was John Mendel. So Tony Accardo, through a few different crews, basically rounded up all the burglars one by one, and they started brutally torturing, killing each burglar from a different nationality to send a message. And the very first one to go was John Mendel. And probably a handful of the 14 murders discussed at the Family Secrets trial were the victims, were the burglars that broke into Tony Accardo's house. They went into great detail. Mostly Nick Calabrese went into great detail how these men were brutally tortured and murdered. So with John Mendel, the leader of the crew, the one that actually broke into Tony Accardo's home, he fell for a ruse by Ronnie Jarrett. Ronnie Jarrett told him that he had a potential score, and he fell for it. He should have caught the play. But John Mendel, when he went to meet Ronnie Jarrett, he was jumped by Frank Calabrese, Nick Calabrese, Ronnie Jarrett, and maybe somebody else. And they brutally strangled him. And then Frank Calabrese handed Nick Calabrese, his younger brother, the knife and said, "You do it." And without any hesitation, Nicky Calabrese had no problem slitting John Mendel's throat from ear to ear. I heard that in graphic detail in court. Nick Calabrese showed absolutely no remorse. Because normally Frank Calabrese would give the Calabrese tie. And the John Mendel murder, he made Nicky do it. Nicky said if he didn't do it, his brother would have killed him. Couple days after John Mendel went missing, his buddy, Bernard, they called him Buddy Ryan, he was discovered dead behind the wheel of his car with 4 bullets in the back of his head. Then Ryan's right-hand man, Stevie Garcia, another victim of the Chicago outfit, one of the 14 murders at the family secret trial. He lasted until around February. He ended up popped up his trunk music. They found him at the Sheraton Hotel right next to O'Hare Airport. Brutally stabbed up, tortured. Then on February 4th, you had Vince Moretti. This idiot was walking around with cufflinks that were stolen from Tony Accardo's house. Him, one of his friends, Don Reno, who had nothing to do with anything, they were lured to a bar in Cicero. They were brutally jumped, beaten, and stomped to death. Poor Reno had nothing to do with it. And then Vince Moretti, they really gave him the business. And all the heavyweights were there, the Calabrese brothers, little Jimmy Marcello, Angelo Petria, Sam Carlisi, according to Nick Calabrese's testimony. But that was two of the murderers. I think they referred to them as strangers in the night. You had Vince Moretti and then Don Reno, brutally beaten and stomped to death at a bar in Cicero. Yeah, when Moretti and Reno were being slaughtered, Strangers in the Night by Johnny Mathis was playing in the background. So imagine getting strangled listening to one of your favorite songs. Then later on, a couple other members of John Mendel's crew were brutally tortured and killed. You had Bobby Herzog, Johnny McDonald. They found Herzog in the trunk of his car, brutally beaten with his with his throat slit. McDonald was shot in the back of the head and dumped in an alley. And then, get this, in order to cover their tracks, Accardo had the houseboy killed, Mike Velope. He disappeared right before he was going to go in front of the grand jury. I even think the contractor or the architect was killed that built and designed Tony Accardo's house. And then, sadly, Dinger, Aiuppa's driver, well-known guy, well-liked guy, but a bad drunk, Jerry Cariciello, he was killed, shot in the back of the head. And then tragically, little Tony Borsellino was killed as well. Not quite sure why Tony Borsellino was killed. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of theories, but I know he was very well liked and loved by a lot of the guys. Frank Calabrese pleaded with Angelo LaPetria not to kill him. Angelo said, "You want to go in the place." But sadly, that was a lot of guys that got clipped for breaking into Tony Accardo's house. Another very close friend, ally, right-hand man, you got Joe Nagel. I believe this is who Tony Accardo would prefer to be the boss, but unfortunately he had serious health issues. This man went to some of the best doctors in the country, in the world, and they couldn't even help him. But like James Turturello, sadly, Joe Ferriola died of health issues. But he would have been a great leader for the Chicago outfit. According to Nicky Calabrese, if you believe his testimony, Ferriola was one of the men present when the Spalter brothers were beat down. And then afterwards, they went out for coffee. Ferriola told Nicky and Faccarata to cut their gloves up into little pieces. But this is Joe Ferriola, very, very close with Tony Accardo. And I've heard he made trips to New York as well. But God bless Joe Ferriola and his family. Now, the gentleman here, I'm not going to say is friends with him, but probably close with him. His one of his top defense attorneys, one of the best back in the day. You got Carl Walsh. There's a Carl Walsh Sr. and a Carl Walsh Jr. I actually seen Carl Walsh when he represented Gus Alex. Another great photo of Accardo and friends, right? Always enjoying themselves, living the life, right? If they're not out whining and dining in groups, they're at somebody's home, having a family birthday party, maybe a holiday, barbecue, picnic, whatever. But these guys really know how to live it up, right? God bless them all. As we all know, he shelved Chicago, retired out to Palm Springs. I mean, how can you blame them, right? Look how beautiful it is there, close to Vegas, close to Arizona, Colorado. Get away from all the drama and nonsense in Chicago. But one thing I will remember when that piece of shit Bob Cooley, cokehead, degenerate gambler, corrupt lawyer, when he testified against and brought down the first ward, that was a big deal for Chicago Outfit because Tony Accardo mentioned we lost the first ward. Like, he questioned that. And I think he knew then that the Chicago Outfit days were over. Once they lost Chicago, the powerful first ward, they lost all their political clout. Very sad day in Chicago. But he was so concerned that he flew home from Palm Springs to discuss the downfall of the first ward. A couple old photos here. Again, Tony Accardo, his beautiful wife. Not sure who this brute here is and his wife. If anybody knows, enter into the comments. Another great photo here. You got JB and a lot of friends. Again, I think one of them might be Willie Messina, and I'm not sure, but whoever knows, I know a lot of my viewers know quite a bit about the Chicago Outfit. Please, if you know who these men are, enter into the comments. And we all know JB not only was a hunter and outdoorsman, but he loved fishing. I mean, look at the size of this. This is how he got the nickname Big Tuna. Big Tuna. So imagine going on fishing trips and vacations in the Caribbean or down to Florida with these guys. JB, like all Italians, right? Loves to cook, loves to eat. Here's another great photo, right? Imagine being at this wedding. You got Joey Aiuppa with his wife, right? You got Paul Ricca, Jack Cerrone, and a couple other fellas. Those were the days. This is probably taken in the 50s. And then here, my favorite photo, right? Let's count them. You got Tony Accardo sitting in the middle of the table. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 32 people. 32 people sitting at this table. This reminds me of my family growing up, being half Italian, half Irish. Every holiday, or usually every Sunday, we had anywhere from 10 to 30 people all sitting around, laughing, telling stories, eating home-cooked delicious meals, all the bakery treats. But look at this, Tony Accardo, wonderful family man here. As we all know, I think it's his 2 great-grandsons are total studs. You got Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa. Not only are they studs, but they're 2 of the best defensemen in the NFL. I think Nick now is playing. He went from San Francisco. I think he's playing for Buffalo, and Joey was playing for the Chargers. But these guys are studs, man. I'm sure his grandfather would be very proud. And then sadly, May 22nd, 1992, Tony Accardo passed away, leaving a legacy in Chicago Outfit, in history of organized crime. If you guys want to add comments, if you enjoyed the story, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Hope everybody has a good week. Stay tuned. I got a couple stories coming up. We're going to talk about we're going to call it ATM. This was a drug dealer that had so much money. An outfit crew robbed this guy repeatedly because they always knew he had a lot of cash, so they called him ATM. I also got a couple interviews I'm working on. If I can get these gentlemen in the studio, their stories are going to blow your mind. You guys are going to love some of these never before heard stories. It'll take my channel from here to off the charts. So everybody have a good week. Stay safe. And for you haters out there, man, put out the fucking cigarettes. Grab the old lady, take her ass to the VFW, and go buy her a little dinner, will ya? Ciao.